They say that the campaigns really don't begin until after Labor Day. And if you've been watching any of our newscasts, you know that's probably true with the amount of advertising that you've been seeing from different candidates. So we wanted to talk politics today with James Barragan. He's a politics reporter with the Texas Tribune. James, we've had you on before. Always appreciate you making time for us. Obviously, when you look at the state races, the governor's race is the biggest. There's a poll that was just out today, I believe, that showed that Governor Abbott has a 5-point lead over Beto O'Rourke. At one point, there was some speculation that the governor's office didn't even think they needed to do a debate. Obviously, they've changed their mind on that debate happening at the end of this month. How are you viewing this race, and how important is that debate that's going to take place in Edinburgh later this month?
Yeah, well, I think no doubt. I think this is still Governor Greg Abbott's race to lose. The polling has shown him ahead 7%, 6%. But now this 5% starts getting in that range where it's like, that's pretty close, you know? And to your point, that debate that everyone thought, well, it's just going to be one debate. It really raises the stakes for both Beto O'Rourke, the Democratic challenger, and for Governor Abbott to sort of try to avoid making any mistakes that would allow for Beto O'Rourke to make inroads with that 5% of voters, where he can sort of start changing the tide and start making this race a little bit closer. So no doubt that debate is going to be more important. And yeah, it looks like it's tightening a little bit. But, you know, at the end of the day, the only poll that matters is in November. So we still got to wait 2 months. But I'm sure your viewers will be seeing a lot more campaigning until then.
Absolutely, and a lot more advertising as well on our airwaves. I also want to talk about Governor Abbott. We have seen Beto O'Rourke debate Ted Cruz, who's by all accounts an accomplished debater. Have we ever seen Governor Abbott debate someone as experienced as Beto O'Rourke?
Well, I think, you know, Governor Abbott is a great legal mind. He's a litigator. I mean, this is kind of what he does as a lawyer. He's ready for arguments. So I don't think he's super worried in those respects. I think, like I said, he's worried about trying not to make mistakes and about making the presentation of his arguments. You know, he's really big right now on border security. He says this is the #1 issue in the state, and that's going to be one of the issues that win him the election. But there's other issues like abortion, where voters right now are having second thoughts of the restrictive abortion law that the state legislature just passed, and they're struggling on sort of talking points. So that's what I mean, where he has to figure out how to talk about those issues in a way that won't turn off voters, will keep them on his side, and that's the big challenge for him.
Everybody knows the governor's race is certainly the one to watch statewide, and most people familiar with things happening locally. But I'm curious if there is a race that you're watching in the House and the Senate in Texas that maybe you think will be pivotal for the rest of the state, have a much wider impact for the rest of us, even if we're not in those districts.
Yeah, well, I think in South Texas and the Rio Grande Valley, there's a couple of races there where congressional seats have been traditionally held by Democrats in districts 15, 34, and 28. Henry Cuellar's district, Vicente Gonzalez's district, and now Myra Flores' district. She flipped that district when Filemon Vela retired. And so those are ones that I'm really interested in because they're key to Republicans' attempts to try to take back the House, but they would also be sort of a big win for Republicans if they were able to flip these seats in areas of South Texas that have traditionally for decades and decades been Democratic, and now Republicans, if they were able to flip those would be incredibly significant.
Obviously, there seems to be a feeling out there, at least among Republicans, that Henry Cuellar is vulnerable because he had to go to a runoff with Jessica Cisneros. They had to have a recount to decide who was going to actually win that seat. Are you hearing the same thing?
Well, I think there's definitely a lot of concern there in Laredo about Cuellar, among Democratic circles, about Cuellar's chances in the race. I think the bigger concern was really in that Democratic primary, because we do see this sort of generational divide among particularly Hispanic voters, where older Hispanic voters are a little bit more conservative. Younger Hispanic voters tend to be more progressive, more liberal. So I think that's what you saw in that Democratic primary. I think from just what we've been seeing and hearing and talking to political experts, there's less concern now about Henry Cuellar, and they think that he has better chances. But nonetheless, Republicans are on the offensive in all three of those congressional races. So I would not take my foot off the gas pedal if I was one of those Democratic candidates.
You know, there's an issue at play here leading up to this election outside of just those top tier topics that are being debated among candidates. Election integrity. We are seeing elections offices, including right here in our area, face lawsuits questioning what's happening during the vote counting process. So how are you seeing that play out throughout the state?
Yeah, we've definitely seen this as fallout after the 2020 presidential elections, coming obviously from the top with President Donald Trump questioning the results of that election. We've seen numerous GOP candidates throughout the country who still have questions and still raise doubts about the validity of the 2020 presidential elections. And that teeters down to a local level where local elections administrators are having to deal with a lot more harassment. They're having to deal with a lot more questions, in some cases lawsuits, about how they administered those elections, even though they're doing what they've been doing for years and going by the letter of the law. But there is obviously much more attention being paid to it by some actors also, it has to be said, who have purely political reasons for doing this. So I think that is a big concern for this election cycle and for the 2024 presidential election cycle, especially if President Donald Trump does try to run again in 2024.
James, you work for the Texas Tribune, and I know one of the big things that they do every year is the Tribune Fest. It takes place in Austin. Talk a little bit about that. I mean, it's really where politics, policymakers all come together and basically take questions, and it's a free and open forum, correct?
Yeah, it's the goal of the Texas Tribune realized in person. And we used to do this festival in person all the time. Obviously, during the COVID-19 pandemic, we couldn't do it. But this year, we're back fully in person. On Saturday, September 24th, we'll be taking over Congress Avenue in Austin for completely free programming that you can attend. We'll be dealing with issues about next year's legislative session, this upcoming election cycle, the Uvalde school shooting, which obviously still has a lot of ramifications for policy and for politics. And there will be some fun stuff, too. If you're not into politics, NBA superstar Chris Bosh is going to be there. There's going to be things that are outside of politics as well. Lyle Lovett, American singer-songwriter, will also be there. Again, completely free on September 24th on Congress. And there is obviously a lot more panels. We have, I think, 350 speakers on 120 panels that will go through the rest of the festival, which starts on Thursday, September 22nd and ends on Saturday, September 24th. And you can always find out more information on tribfest.org, but we're extremely excited to be back in person.
Yeah, there's some big names involved with all of those different panelists, and September 24th, the free day. So that's the one to keep everybody's eye on. James, thank you so much for being here. I sure appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Take care. We'll be right back.